Context of White Supremacy, Gus T. Renegade, and Justice, hopefully in to provide constructive information on racism, white supremacy, what it is, and how it works. Justice, she's taking a break for the day, but she will be back for the weekend shows, definitely working on constructive information. I believe she's even working on a book that deals with racism, white supremacy. So she continues to be constructive, and hopefully we'll have her back for the weekend programs. She's listening. Hello, Justice. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to the broadcast. We'll be back this weekend. Next show is Saturday at 4 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Central, and 1 p.m. Pacific. We will have Richard Bernstein in to talk about his book, The East, the West, and Sex. It is all about sexual intercourse between white people and so-called Asian people. So tune in. I think that will be a constructive program. Before we get started, definitely want to thank Back of the Bus, constructive assistance, also Non-Mighty Wick, very constructive assistance, victims working to do constructive things against racism. Today's guest, he just had an article featured in the Seattle Times that was dealing with his brand new book, just came out this year. The name of his book is The Only Black Student. Our guest, he's an alumnus at the University of Washington, non-white male, and he talks about being at a university that is predominantly white and being a non-white student in that environment, what it's like, the day-to-day experiences, both in the classroom and just stuff you would deal with in the dorm, going to parties, just all aspects of being a non-white college student. Very interesting book. The write-up in the Seattle Times was nice as well. You can check that out on the web, Seattle Times newspaper. I spoke with him a few weeks ago, actually, and he was gracious enough to take some of his time to speak with us this evening. He sent me an autographed book. I felt special. Our guest for the evening, and I think I'm actually going to get his name correct. If I botch it, I hope he will correct me. Our guest for the evening is Mr. Lull Mengesha. And see, are you with us, sir?
I am, and thank you for the introduction. Very close, Lull Mengesha.
Lull Mengesha, is that it?
Yeah, very close.
Okay.
Yeah,
I was close. Close.
It's a hard name, so okay.
Outstanding. If you could please, sir, if you could share with our listeners just any constructive information that you would like to share to let them know a little bit more about who you are and why you wrote this book.
Okay, excellent. So my name is Lull Mengesha, and I'm the author of The Only Black Student. I started writing this book my senior year as an undergraduate at the University of Washington. I was mentoring students on campus, and when I was graduating, I realized I wasn't going to be there anymore to give them advice and guidance on how to navigate and really tackle a lot of the challenges that I faced as an incoming freshman to the University of Washington. So I started collecting questions from the guys I was mentoring, and I'd work with my mentors, and we just kept on building these questions, and eventually it turned into, part memoir, part advice, and now we have The Only Black Student, and it's doing pretty good right now, and a lot of members within education are finding value in the book, so I'm excited about that.
Outstanding. Yeah, we definitely want to get into the book and a lot of the issues that you deal with. Before we start all that off, I do just want to clarify, you are a non-white male, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. This program, the context of white supremacy, I have unfortunately concluded that we are in a global system of racism, white supremacy, and the definition that I use for racism, white supremacy is a global system of people who classify themselves as white and are dedicated to abusing and or subjugating everyone in the known universe whom they classify as non-white. Do you think that such a system exists, and do you think that definition is correct?
Ooh, that's a loaded question there. I do think there are systems at any institution that benefit those that have have a long lineage. So if their parents were part of that institution, or if they're privileged, then they benefit. But I don't know if everybody within the white community, if their goal is to abuse or take advantage. I've found that I've built good relationships with people within the white community that are just as focused on diversity and making sure that every student gets the opportunity for education. So I can't have a blanket statement as far as everyone within the white community.
Okay. Do you believe that there's a system of racism, white supremacy?
Yeah, I do believe that there are places where you will find a system, whether it's a good old boy system that I think a lot of people are familiar with. I do believe there are systems in place.
Okay. So you believe there's a system of racism, white supremacy, but you don't think that that definition is correct. You feel like there are white people that do not practice racism.
Right, definitely.
Okay.
For sure.
That's keeping pretty consistent with the numbers we've had on this program. The non-white people, about half of them either do not believe that there's a system of racism, white supremacy, or they don't think that my definition is accurate. For the white people, and I generally have, I've had a lot more white people on this program than non-white people. White people, every white person that has been on this program has said yes. They do believe there's a system of white supremacy, and every white person that's been on this program, except for 3, have said that they think that definition is accurate. And the 3 white people, for everyone tuning in, the 3 white people who have not agreed, one of them was a former imperial wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. One of them wrote an article suggesting that using the term white supremacy would be constructive to working against racism, white supremacy, but she came on this program and would not use the term, did not think that definition was accurate. And the last person on our last program began the program saying he was white. By the end of the program, he said he was not white. So I think that is an interesting trend to note on the cows. Your book, as you already explained, you said it's part kind of your personal autobiography of your collegiate experience at the University of Washington. You also said it has a lot of suggestions, and when I read it, that was kind of what I was thinking. This is like a code, kind of, sort of, different rules and suggestions for things that might be helpful to non-white people.
Right.
Why did you think this was something? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, a lot of people are looking at it as more like a mentor in a book or a workbook through college, just a navigational tool.
Why did you think something like this, that you should write something like this, and did you think that non-white students needed something like this?
Well, I wrote it because, it's something that I would have needed my freshman year. It's something that I did need, but there wasn't anything available like that. So before I started writing the book, I was going to bookstores trying to find some type of tool similar to this to help out students that were going into higher education, and I couldn't find anything that really summed up, like a personal experience mixed with advice. So I took it upon myself to start writing it, and now we have the only black student. Can
you describe? You said you would have benefited or would have enjoyed having something like this when you began your college experience. Can you kind of describe for our listeners what it was like going to, when you first arrived at the University of Washington, black male at a huge university, 40,000 students, and mostly white students?
Correct. Okay. So first I'll say that I attended a predominantly black high school in South Seattle, Washington, and when I did attend the University of Washington, my first quarter there was pretty challenging, adapting to the new social dynamics of a university. I mean, any student's going to face those challenges, but I felt like many of the students of color that were coming from the same background as me, we weren't just navigating in the classroom, but we had to play this game of navigating socially and culturally. Finding ways to connect with peers from different backgrounds was something that that was a skill set that I hadn't developed yet. I knew how to work with other black students. I knew how to work with like Polynesian students and many other students that were coming from the same lower income backgrounds, but I didn't know how to connect with my peers from upper middle class neighborhoods. And just finding those commonalities was one of the biggest challenge that I found my freshman year.
So I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly. Being a non-white student relating to other white students was kind of difficult when you first arrived. Is that correct?
Yes, it was.
Okay. What was different about relating to the white students? I mean, there are a lot of them here. Certainly not lack of access. What was made it challenging?
I would say commonalities. Many of the things that I understood about my relationships with my peers were through a very narrow window, and that window came from my high school. If you didn't talk the same way as I did, if you didn't find the same things, same type of music entertaining, or if you didn't grow up in if you didn't grow up in the same neighborhoods, it was hard for me to understand that there was a lot more going on, and that developed and that growth came over my years at the University of Washington. So just building those commonalities early on was challenging.
And you in your book, The Only Black Student, you do talk about a lot of different experiences that you had with white students, and it seems like incidents of racism while you were a student here. I definitely want to get into that. I did want to ask, in your book, you use the term the majority students. I was curious about your use of that term.
Well, we're always, black students, Latino students, we're always summed up as minority students. So I always thought, if we're summed up as minority, then white and Asian students would be put in the majority. So I just wanted to put things in scope and into reference throughout the book, because I'm talking a lot about white and Asian students. I wanted it to be clear that they were painted in the same umbrella as under majority students. And I also use the term PWI, which is a predominantly white institution, because it relates to any school where, whether it's a university or a community college, that term can be used for both.
Before I want to get into some specific details about your book. I also want, as we're going along, I want to sprinkle in some of the wisdom that you shared in your book, so that hopefully people, if they're listening, if they are in college or maybe in high school and thinking about going to college, if they're non-white students, they will pick up some of the suggestions that you have in your book, and perhaps will go check it out for themselves so they can pick up some of the knowledge from your experiences. Could you share with us maybe 5 things that 5 things you wish someone had told you that would have really helped you be successful going to a predominantly white institution as a non-white male?
Excellent. 5 things. So,
yes, sir.
Okay, I'll start. 1 would be, I have a section called Even the Playing Field, and that one basic thing is, buying books, and where we as minority students put that as a priority. A lot of the time we'll put other things as priorities over our books. Like when we get financial aid, we will buy, it sounds that we'll buy clothing or we'll get other things situated first, and then we'll buy books, like the day before classes start, where our peers that are coming from more prepared backgrounds, they will have already read the sections or the chapters that are going to be reviewed on the first day of class. So that's one thing right there. Building my vocabulary for some of the technical classes I took. I majored in economics, but I satisfied all the prerequisites for dental school, and I didn't have the vocabulary or the understanding of the vocabulary used in the classroom. So I spent a lot of time outside of class learning vocabulary for the material in class. So that was another challenge that I faced, and I don't think it's something that you need to go through. Third would probably be working with peers from different backgrounds, finding basic commonalities that you can find across the board. When you meet somebody new, if you talk about things that everybody shares in common, for example, even things as small as like the weather or sports or anything that is not difficult to talk to with people from different backgrounds. I think that's something you should look at. It's an easy way to build relationships, and those relationships can then turn into study groups or even long-lasting friendships. Another one is not getting too involved. I was very active on campus in a large variety of different activities, but my GPA did suffer. So I think one piece of advice I'd have for students is to find a balance with the class rigor as well as the activities outside of the classroom. And let's see, that's 4, right? We're on 4?
Yes, sir. One more.
Okay. Man, there's so many other things to talk about, but I would say the way you deal with some of the more challenging experiences you have with peers, whether somebody's calling you the N-word or you're at a party and you're feeling awkward. I mean, or dealing with the cops. There's ways to handle it that many times we don't do, I think, correctly, where we get very angry and we show a lot of emotion when times we should let things kind of just roll off of our back. I think those are 5 things that I would think about.
Okay. We're definitely going to get into some of the things that you mentioned about, and I don't have any sensitivities around the word nigger. I think for this program, I think it's constructive use of the term. We're definitely going to talk about that because you address some of those incidents in your book, as well as dealing with enforcement officials, police officers as well. So we're going to touch on that as well. Again, the only black student, Mr. Lull Mengesha. Did I say it correctly?
Cool Lull. So just cool Lull. And then you got
Lull.
it. The
Lull, okay.
Yeah.
Lull Mengesha.
Lull Mengesha, yeah. My family's from Ethiopia, so.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Habesha.
I am Habesha. Salam, salam.
Gotcha. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I found this. The book in itself is interesting. I hope folks that are listening in will pick up a copy. His website, if you're listening at Blog Talk Radio, his website is linked in the description for the program. You can click on it. Click on his name. It'll take you to his website. You can pick it up. One of the things that you talked about pretty early on in the book, you said that you felt white students would benefit from taking an ethnic studies course that would help them being able to establish better relationships with non-white students, that's something that you think would be really constructive. Can you share more about that with our listeners?
Right. So, I mean, let's think about it in the terms of the black experience. Every day, if you're working or you're in school as a black student, you're interacting with white students. If you're at a predominantly white institution. But many times, white students don't have to work with black peers because of the low numbers. So where are these white students actually going to learn about different cultures? If it's not firsthand, then it should be within the classroom. We are constantly learning about different cultures as minorities because there's so much information about them, and we're engaged with them in the classroom or at work. Gyms. I mean, any place we go to, you're going to find, at least in the Northwest. I do live in Seattle, remember, so you're going to see a lot of white people, and you're going to experience their culture. So I think if you had the opportunity to take an ethnics course or sociology course that talked about race relations, you could see more of the role that blacks have played within the U.S. and just on a basic daily level, you can understand more about our culture.
I found this fascinating for a myriad of reasons. I guess I would ask, number one, do you think, just based on your experiences, that a white student could thrive at a predominantly white institution and, once they graduate and move on into the workforce, do you think a white person could be successful with no ethnic studies information, never really taking time to learn about non-white people?
Well, I mean, they're currently, a lot of them are not taking those courses right now, and they seem to be doing well within the country. So I'd say they can, but they're also, by not engaging in other cultures, they're limiting what that success is. You know, you're not having cross-cultural relationships, so you're going to have a very specific and smaller network than someone like me, for example, I pride myself on how inclusive I am and how I try to engage with different cultures. So I have the opportunity to learn from more people. So that's the benefit of being more inclusive and learning about different cultures.
I also want to tip, I am also in Seattle, and I'm actually on the campus of the University of Washington right now, and have done quite a bit of research here. Some of the research that I've done has focused on a lot of the white people here who do take ethnic studies classes and African American studies courses, Asian American studies courses, and learn a lot about non-white people. I have seen that a lot of these white people, when they study about non-white people, the end result is not that they no longer practice racism. The end result is that they end up being extraordinarily skilled at being able to practice racism. Specifically, they end up being able to be around non-white people, and they can show, hey, I know a lot about you guys. And the non-white people aren't suspicious of them. They think, hey, this person knows about Malcolm X, and this person knows about A. Philip Randolph, and this person knows about Haile Selassie, and blah, blah, blah. This person is not a racist. And the white person still practices racism. They're just very informed. Do you think white people taking these classes would lessen their willingness or their desire to want to practice racism?
Wow, that's a pretty interesting question. I think what it's going to do is cause people to at least have the conversation about race. So whether they become more skilled at it, I think the thing to look at is the fact that they're at least learning about a new culture. The way they use it, I'd hope they use it for good and try to engage in different cultures versus telling people, hey, I know more about you than you do, and that's interesting. I've never had that interaction.
I think some of the other non-white people, I know Back of the Bus, he's also a student here at the University of Washington, and I think quite a few of us have seen white people go through, particularly the CHID department, Comparative History of Ideas here at the University of Washington, have seen these white people study about non-white people and learn lots of information, even going abroad, going to different countries in Africa or South America or Cuba, and they end up becoming extraordinarily informed about non-white people while still practicing racism, white supremacy. I just wanted to throw that out for the listeners to keep in mind. Just because white people take an ethnic studies class doesn't necessarily mean that they are not going to be mistreating you because you're a non-white person. Again, so many parts of your book, very, very interesting. You talked about when you arrived at the University of Washington and you were a great high school student, mostly A's, really confident in your abilities, and you got here and it was much more challenging. And please correct me if I'm misstating something that you said in the book, but it seemed like you were saying you felt that a lot of the white students were much better prepared than the non-white students. Can you break that down for our listeners?
Right. Well, I think the thing with that is many of them were coming from school districts where they were becoming more prepared. They were challenged with more rigor, and the courses they were taking were difficult. So I received an A in calculus my senior year, AP calculus. But when I took my math placement test at the University of Washington, I didn't place into calculus or pre-calculus or algebra. I mean, I placed into a remedial math course. And if it wasn't for the support I received from different services on campus, I would have given up at that point. But I found different ways to still be engaged in the classroom and receive the support I needed to take the math placement test over again. And I did end up performing better, but what it is preparation. A lot of the white students are coming from middle-class neighborhoods and middle-class school systems where they're just more prepared than we are. I mean, that's a reality.
From your book, and I mean, hey, you're an alumnus, you're in grad school now. It seems like you took a very active stance in trying to correct that and getting the help that you needed. Can you talk about what steps you took not to get down and sulk about it and, oh, my gosh,
Right.
I can't believe I got this placement. Can you share that so folks can get an understanding?
Right. Well, I mean, you can, and this is just a life lesson. You can play the victim in any situation, or you can find out where you need help and reach out. And that's what I always try to do, is find support when I need help. And I went to the Office of Minority Affairs on our campus, and then I worked with instructors at the Instructional Center, which is a study center for students that are in the Office of Minority Affairs. And I worked with Brian McLean, who was one of the math instructors at the time, and we went over different practice exams, and he just worked on where my weaknesses were at and identified them. And for a few weeks, I kept on studying the math placement exam and retaking the practice exams over and over again until I retook the real one and placed into Math 103, which I believe was pre-calculus. So it was not calculus where I expected to be at, but it was still a little victory for me,
For sure.
So.
For sure. That is one thing I have noted, just, observing non-white students and white students. It seems like non-white students somehow do not get information about all of the resources that major universities, to really any college or university, the resources that are available for students, all sorts of resources, whether it's study abroad programs, whether you're struggling in a course and need tutoring, and generally they just have tons of free resources for students. And it seems like you got tapped into that and got exactly what you said. You got the help that you needed. You realized you needed assistance, and you got it. Could you share, I guess, with anybody that's listening, if they're in college, not in college, how you would advise someone to go about finding those resources that they need?
Okay. Well, I believe most state schools are going to have something similar to Office of Minority Affairs or a Diversity Center, where you can reach out and find different counselors and tutors and where their support services are at. And I think it's important to get engaged with that as early as possible in your collegiate career. When you do find those resources, it'll be easier for you to reach out to them when you have a moment where you might be struggling in the classroom. Knowing where to find those services many times is just as important as knowing how to study. Because, say I was deficient in a class, going to one of those support services would allow me to find a tutor or a mentor that could help me out. And not just that, but you'll find that there are many minority students at these places who are doing well, who are successful in the classroom. So then you're creating also a social network and mentorship. You're seeing people that are performing that look just like you, and I think that's very important to see, because many times you'll feel like you're the only one going through the challenges that you face.
Outstanding. Again, the only black student author, Lull Mengesha. Did I say it correctly?
You got it. You got it.
Gotcha. Outstanding. I hope everybody is paying attention to that, because I really did feel like your book had a lot of excellent suggestions, some of the stuff I even wish I had when I was going through that whole process. You talk a lot in your book, since you had already talked about how you felt like a lot of the white students, they were just better prepared. They had, better access to information during high school. Maybe they had parents and grandparents and uncles and stuff that had went to college and graduated. And a lot of non-white students don't have a similar background, don't necessarily have parents or what have you that have graduated from a major institution. And you talk about how many non-white students have a feeling that the white students are just smarter. The non-white students feel like they're just not capable of competing with white students. Can you talk about that and I guess how you try to overcome that to be successful?
Well, I think one thing I did was I didn't compare myself with the white students in the classroom who came from these backgrounds where they might have been more prepared than me. I had my own struggles and that I was facing when I came to the University of Washington. For me, the biggest thing was just making sure that I made it. And when you start focusing on how other people are more prepared than you, it can get negative, because then you're playing the victim role, and you can start saying, "Oh, they're more prepared than me. Oh, they're better than me. They're smarter than me." But that's not the case. Many times they are more prepared. That is what you should look at. They might be more prepared than you, but they are not more intelligent than you. When you start thinking that way, then your confidence can start to drift, and you really need to stay confident throughout college, throughout the entire time. Almost, sometimes even cocky. Just knowing that you are intelligent is really the biggest thing.
As a non-white student at a predominantly white institution, do you feel like it's challenging for non-white people to kind of maintain some self-esteem and maintain some confidence while they're there?
Right. Yeah. It's just you don't see a lot of people who look like you, and a lot of people can take that for granted, not realizing what it's like to see your mentors who are coming from the same cultural backgrounds as you. Like, white students probably don't even have to think about that, because there's so many examples around them of people who are successful who look just like them. But for me, I leached on anybody who was successful. And if you were successful and you look like me, then that was even better. I would harass you on a regular basis. I would get as much advice from you as possible. I would tell you how things were going with my experience, and just making sure that you were understanding how things were going for me. So they were also holding me accountable and making sure that I was okay.
Outstanding. I think one of, and I'm speaking from my own experiences as well, I think one of the things as a non-white student, when you're in an environment, lots of white people, one of the things that can really drain your confidence is if you are experiencing racism. And in your book, you shared a ton of different examples about where it seemed like white people were probably practicing racism against you, both enforcement officials on campus, roommates, just a myriad of examples. And I want to share some of these specific incidents from the book, because I hope anybody, if they're listening, you're going to college, I hope this will help them kind of prepare for things that they might encounter, and perhaps give them some strategies on how they can deal with it in the best way so that it doesn't become a big roadblock for them. One of the things you talked, or one of many that you talked about, you were talking about a course that you were taking on the economy in Israel, and you seemed really enthused about it, and you were doing this work to study how Ethiopians who were in Israel, a lot of the research just showed these people were being mistreated, probably victims of racism. And so you get this paper together, and you go to the teacher. Can you talk about that experience for our listeners?
Okay, so when I first had we got to turn in a proposal, and I in the class was economics of Israel. So for me, I wanted to study the Ethiopian immigration to Israel, because I thought that was very interesting. That's where my family's from. I wanted to learn more about it. I turned in that proposal, and the professor seemed really excited about it. He even used it as an example for the classroom. But when I started researching information about it, all I could find was the racism that Ethiopians faced when they came to Israel. That was the only information that was available. So I shifted my paper onto that focus. So I turned in a paper that was focused on that. The next day, my professor asked to see me. And I thought it was, I didn't think it was anything unusual, because from what I understood, he regularly met with students to make sure they're on track with the coursework. Mm-hmm. So when I came into his office, he was almost offended by the paper. And
oh wait, was this a white professor?
He was a white professor.
Okay.
and he was just very offended that I would think that Ethiopians received or that they had a racist experience. To him, he thought that they were lucky to even come to Israel, and that they could have still been in Ethiopia.
Wow.
So, I mean, that was a tough learning experience for me, and what I learned is that you really have to know your audience when you're doing an assignment or when you're working on anything. Really, it's important to understand who you're writing to. So that was a big learning lesson from me, and that was the thing about many of the stories in the book. I'll share one of these challenges, but it's important to understand that they are great learning experiences if you take them the right way. I mean, let's take it out of this context of that story. When many people are applying to college, they're not on their college applications. They're not saying, you're my second choice university. I'm applying to this school because it's my safety school, right? You know your audience, so you're saying to this university, I really want to come here, and you're listing reasons why, and I mean, it's just about knowing who you're writing to.
For sure.
And that was a lesson that I had to learn the hard way. So,
was your grade adversely impacted as a result of your topic that you chose for that report?
Oh yeah. Well, I was doing really well in the course before that, and he was using a lot of my information as for examples in the classroom. I resubmitted my paper, and I only focused on statistical data from the research I found, and I didn't talk about race. I just talked about the difference from the Ethiopian economy to Israel and how they were able to progress economically.
Yes, sir.
But even so, my GPA dropped by I think 0.4, so I ended up getting like a 2.8 or 2.9 in the course.
Wow.
But it happens.
And it does. That when I read that, I laughed. Not at your mistreatment. I laughed because I have seen that happen repeatedly, and particularly if the non-white student is doing anything about racism. I know non-white students who've been in classes that are focused on racism. That's what you're supposed to be talking about in this class. And they talked about it, and they had a white professor. White professor got upset. I've even seen this get to the point where they were studying The Heart of Darkness. And I mean, white people even say, this book is incredibly racist. I hear tons of white people say this book is incredibly racist. Joseph Conrad, oh my gosh, this book, it's a great book, but it is racist. A non-white student was writing about this book at the University of Washington and had the exact same experience. They wrote something on racism, grades started to come down. And you talked about personal statements. I would definitely suggest if you're a non-white student, you're doing a personal statement for college, I would not talk about racism. I would not include anything about trying to make up for the injustices that non-white people have faced at the hands of white. Don't include anything like that in your personal statement if you want to go to that school. Even if that's your safety net school, I wouldn't talk about it. And I've even got to the point where I kind of caution people about taking those classes on racism if they're non-white, because I feel like it can get real touchy, and at the end of the day, that person is controlling your grade. Might not be the time to get on your soapbox, and even if you got accurate information, you said you had just done research, and that's what the research said, might not be the best time to talk about white supremacy and what you suspect white people have done worldwide. Actually, our phone line lit up here. If it's all right with you, I wanted to get some of the calls out, and then we can go back to getting other incidents in your book, because I definitely want to talk about your man Cody. We got 951. If you have a question for Mr. Mengesha, please go ahead.
Greetings, sir. I was just actually listening in. Greetings, Lou. This is Back of the Bus. I'm not going to say my name on the air, but you might recognize my voice.
Sounds familiar.
Okay. If I see you, I'll let you know. I wanted to also say I'm a student at the University of Washington, and I've experienced the same thing in the classroom, being a non-white male. Anytime the system of white supremacy is spoken about, even if the class is supposed to be about the system of racism, being a non-white, you should expect a lot of mistreatment. Generally not productive, like you said, Gus. But, yeah, interesting program. I'm just listening for now, and you can continue on to other callers. Thank you.
Gotcha. Thank you for calling in back of the bus. Very constructive assistance with the cows context of white supremacy. I'm going to get to some of the other callers that we have. Actually, I want to give one more story in, and then we'll get some more callers in. You talked about, excuse me, you talked about, and I got to do this one because I have experienced the exact same thing. I have never met in person Mr. Mengesha, but I also have, or he had dreads. He talked about in the book while he was a student, he had dreadlocks. I have dreadlocks now. I suspect he already knows where I'm going with this. How many times you were stopped by white, not just random white people, white students that you might have had a class with? Could you hook me up with some weed? Can you talk about that, please, for our listeners?
Right. There's like a dual effect to that. Oftentimes, students will see that you fit like a Bob Marley stereotype, and assume that you're like a drug dealer or that you have a connect when it comes to weed or so. A lot of students would just always ask me if I had any weed or. And I don't smoke weed, so I thought it was. I can see where they're going with it. You know, you see a black student on campus, and their assumption is that I'm a drug dealer. So, but also on the tail end of that, what you'll see is when there's petitioning or tabling on campus, like really active things going on, students ignore you. So they won't engage in conversation with you or ask you to participate in whatever they're doing. And I don't know if it has to do with the fact that they might not view you as a student, but I think those two situations play into each other, where students will see you as maybe a drug dealer, but they also won't see you as a student. So,
Wow. I can. Oh, I'm sorry. Please finish.
But I was just going to say that's something to observe.
Yes, sir. I can co-sign on both of those. The weed thing was kind of startling because I had dreads for years. I'm not from Seattle, and I moved here not that long ago, and I'd had dreads lots of other cities. I'd never had particularly white people, just random white people that I didn't know stopping me on the street. Hey, do you have any weed? That's a whole new experience for me that really just made me very uncomfortable. And I've heard other non-white people.
Is that something that you've only really faced here in the Northwest? Or?
Yes, sir. Yes,
wow.
sir. I have lived in California. I have lived in Georgia. I have lived in Virginia. I have left the country. I have never been anywhere where I have been stopped by random white people on a constant basis. I'm not exaggerating. I was telling a white person, I was explaining this to her, and she was incredulous. She didn't believe me. She thought I was making something up. A white person walked up in the middle of our conversation about this and said, hey, do you have any weed? And I just looked at her, and she said, oh, my gosh, I can't believe that happened. I said, no, you're not listening to me. This is every day. And so we kept talking for about 10 minutes, and she said, I can't believe he just walked up like that. Da-da-da-da-da. Another white person walked up. Hey, do you have any weed? And her mouth just hit the ground. She said, oh, my God, what is this? Da-da-da-da. And I said, this is every day. And beyond the fact, that is extraordinarily dangerous. If you say yes, and that happens to be an enforcement official, you can go to jail for conspiracy to sell narcotics, which is another thing that bothers me about it. So, like I said, when I read your book, I laughed. I immediately connected, and I can also connect with the tabling thing and how they ignore you for that. They assume you sell drugs. They assume that you don't want to talk about anything political, or if they're organizing to vote, or anything where you might have to use your brain. No. In addition to the fact that I've seen tons of white people who smoke weed on campus, and people don't seem to bother them to run up and ask if they sell drugs or anything like that. Just very, very interesting.
Right. I think for another thing within the white community, it's probably there's no stereotype for who smokes weed, so they wouldn't know who to walk up to. But I think within the black community, I guess the stereotype is that if you have some type of Bob Marley look to you, then you are a weed connect.
Wow. And I do not. Anybody who finds me in Seattle, I do not. You're talking to the wrong person. 253, if you have a question you would like to ask Mr. Mengesha, you are on.
Hello, can I be heard?
Yes, ma'am.
I had a question as far as, the term white supremacy and just being, like, I guess, feeling excluded. And I know that Back at the Bus had made a comment about using the term white supremacy. I'm sorry I missed part of that. But in my experience, it seems like when you're using the term white supremacy, it kind of causes conflict amongst non-white people. And then with the white people, there's, potentially more mistreatment that can come from that. I'm wondering, do you have a suggestion to be able to talk about white supremacy and counter racism, but not necessarily use that term?
This is directed towards me, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So when I talk about race or diversity, I'm often using terms of being exclusive or being inclusive, because I think that encompasses everybody. If you talk about how to get people included into what might be considered a very exclusive group, whether it's a white fraternity house, or if it's a study group where students are only working with each other that have came from the same background, I feel like it's a lot easier to talk to different people when you're only using the terms inclusive and exclusive. So that's always kind of been my angle. I think the less you actually talk about race, you make it a lot easier for different cultures to work together. Did that answer your question?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand that. I didn't quite understand the response.
Okay, so your question was, you're saying if you're trying to engage in a conversation with people from different backgrounds and you want to talk about race, is that correct?
Not necessarily race, but actual white supremacy and just how sometimes people are being mistreated under the system. And it seems like there's more success in engaging other people when you're describing the actual problem and not linking it or connecting it to white supremacy. People seem to be more apt to help when it's not being called white supremacy. So I guess just my question is, would you say that it's important to call it that, one, and then two, just, is there anything else to call it to make it easier to solve problems?
Okay, so yeah, I think I was trying to answer pretty much what you said. I don't use the term white supremacy. I talk specifically about different opportunities and different conversations that need to happen within cross-cultural. So you're having a conversation about, say, maybe you're talking about white privilege, and it's important to talk more about the actual things that being white and being privileged provide you, and talk about how exclusive a community can be versus actually saying, hey, all of you white people are exclusive, because all you white people are practicing, being white supremacists. I think when you throw that in somebody's face, even if they are open to different cultures and different communities, it's automatically you're going to have them on the offensive. So for me, I've just never used that term, but I hope that was helpful. But I just have never called anybody or never said anything about somebody having white supremacy.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
You must be an all-star. You have tons of callers coming in. I'm going to get some more. I did want to throw my 1 cent in, and I could be incorrect, so, don't take my word, as though this is the law. Just think about it. These are suggestions. This program is specifically designed to share information for non-white people. So for this program, I just try to use the most accurate terms, and I think System of White Supremacy is the most accurate term to describe what we have on the planet right now. So this is very different from what I would do if I was in a job setting or if I was in a classroom setting. Or even if I was in amongst just regular non-white people, if we were just sitting around having coffee. If they're non-white people, I've noticed a lot of non-white people are not comfortable with the term white supremacy. With them, I will shift and I'll use the term racism. That seems to work all right with non-white people, but I do try to catch them up, or I don't want to say catch them up. I do try to get them to be more comfortable using the term white supremacy because that is the most accurate term, and I do think words are very important in terms of just getting an understanding of what we're talking about and thinking about things correctly. If I'm talking to white people, it very much depends on the setting. If I'm in a job, we're not talking about racism at all. We're just trying to get things done. If I'm being mistreated, it's just going to be about what is the correct thing to do. I think Mr. Edward Williams at Counter-Dash Racism, he says he just talks about justice and making sure that we're doing things in the correct manner. And he can talk about racism and never say the term racism, just talking about people not being mistreated, justice, and doing things in the correct manner. And I've seen that work effectively. If the white people, if they do anything where we're supposed to be talking about racism, white privilege conference, or any of these meetings where white people organized to explicitly talk about racism, I'm just using white supremacy. And I've seen white people, they will generally follow suit and use white supremacy. I have not seen it be a problem if white people have agreed to talk about racism where I just use white supremacy. They generally switch and start using white supremacy as well. It does throw them off a little bit, but they will generally go ahead and start using white supremacy. And once they do it, the non-white people tend to get comfortable. It's like you need to get permission from white people to say white supremacy type of a thing. And I think a lot of non-white people have observed that. But that's something you kind of have to experiment with yourself, I think, just to see what you're comfortable with and to see what works. I definitely know a lot of people are not comfortable with that term, but you can use, there are other words you can use. You can even use racism and roll with that. But I do think white supremacy is the most accurate term. Putting my soapbox away. Did you have any other comments or questions, 253?
No other questions. I do have to say I appreciate the suggestion and that, I agree with you that, it seems like most white people are more comfortable with the term, but it seems like, mostly the non-white people that, when I'm trying to talk about countering racism, and then even just general problem solving within daily life, it's them that get most uncomfortable, and that's very unfortunate because, there's a lot of problems to be solved, and if there's, if we could somehow just get past the barrier of just the word or the words white supremacy, then I think that we could solve much more problems as non-white people.
Hear, hear. I agree. Mr. Williams, I can steal another one. Mr. Williams says when he's with non-white people, he tries to shift it just to solving problems. And he said that he's found when you shift it to solving problems, once problems begin to get solved, the non-white people become much more receptive to having a discussion about racism once their problems start to be taken care of. So that might be one to just focus on solving problems and then gradually bring racism in as the problems are being taken care of.
All right. Thanks.
No problem.
Thank you for calling.
Let's see. 770, do you have a question? 770, you're live on the air. Perhaps they are just listening. I'll check later. 816, do you have a question for Mr. Mengesha?
Hello?
Yes, sir. We can hear you.
Oh, no, I was just listening for I was just listening for now.
Oh, okay. Anybody that is listening, if you have a question, press 1, and I'll know that you have a comment or question you'd like to make, and I will get to you. I'm going to get back to some of my questions since everybody is satisfied on the line for now. You talked about your roommate, your first year at the University of Washington, and you said you actually had two white roommates, and you all were kind of cramped in a room that was supposed to be for two people, and ended up being three of you.
Right.
You said one of your roommates was cool, one not so cool. Can you talk about some of the things that happened with the not so cool roommate?
Right. So I think, within the first week, we had a conversation about financial aid, and he explained to me that white students couldn't get financial aid. And I was 17. I didn't really know much about the process, but I was pretty sure it wasn't, race-based. But at the same time, I also wasn't bragging about the fact that I was on financial aid. So that was just one of the types of conversations that we'd have where he was misinformed. And also, I was misinformed. I didn't know enough to counter his arguments, but at the same time, that was the type of environment that was fostered in that dorm room. We would talk about these different topics, and it just seemed as if he felt that he was, shafted because he wasn't a minority. And I was on the other end thinking, you actually doesn't seem like you really need financial aid. So, but yeah, had he applied and had he fit the need based on financials, then he would have received financial aid. But that's just something that he wasn't aware of.
Very interesting. You did. Oh, I'm sorry.
And I was just going to say that was like the first week, my freshman year. You're excited to be in college, living with new people, and that was, the experience I faced with him.
Wow. I'm just curious because I know here at UW they trashed the so-called affirmative action program. Did you hear any chatter about that in your time at the University of Washington?
Oh, about I-200 initiative?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I mainly stayed in the sciences, but my friends that were in classes that discussed race, and I would hear about the types of conversations that people would have based around, should race be part of the application process? And the counter that a lot of minorities would use is that white students who are children of former Huskies, and Husky is the mascot for the University of Washington, for those that are not from the area. So if you're a former Husky or your parents are former Huskies, then you would receive, you would have more of an in for getting into college, just the same way that students of color who may not have went to college, or their parents may not have went to college if they're first generation to college, that was their added boost. So I thought that on campus there are already these existing ways to help different groups of people get to college, and I just thought, I never saw why it was such a big deal. I mean, this incoming class of black students at C.W., I think, is at 131, if I'm not mistaken. So
out of 40,000.
Well, out of the incoming class is 5,000 students. So I mean, 131 out of 5,000. But to me, I don't understand why people complain so much about I-200 or affirmative action when there's not a lot of students to begin with. So all that it's trying to do is build a critical mass on campus, and I don't know. So that's my view on it.
The 40,000 I'm referencing is the total student body of the University of Washington. I don't even think they have 5,000 with the Asian population they probably do, but if we're just talking about black students, I don't even think they have 5,000 black students at the University of Washington. I would bet my show that they do not have 5,000 black students at the University of Washington. I could be incorrect.
I would agree with that.
And I did want to be correct, because you also pointed out that even though you did have that one experience with the one roommate, you did have another white roommate, and you said he was more open, and you all did have a pretty good relationship.
Yeah, I mean, he's one of my best friends. He's a really good guy, and he just came from a very open background. His parents are educators, and they're just open in other cultures. You could tell that he came into college and he didn't have any stereotypes or he didn't use any generalizations before he met me. You know, we were just people, and we built commonalities off of that, off of our interest for similar movies. You know, we watched Varsity Blues a lot in the dorm room, and I remember that we both liked Adam Sandler. You know, so I mean, there were things that we enjoyed, and we were able to build our friendship based off of that, and we didn't really focus on the fact that he was white or I was black.
Okay. Man, you are an all-star, Mr. Mengesha. You have lit the phone line up completely. Anybody that's on the phone line, it's a lot of you, just press 1 if you have a question. I will get to you. I see all of you. Just press 1, and I'll get to you. While they're waiting to press 1, you also talked about, I definitely got to get to the RA situation, because I feel like
what happened to Cody? Didn't you want to talk about?
Oh, I didn't forget Cody. Wait, I didn't forget. I'm saving the best for last. I'm saving the best for last. Actually, the 2 best I thought of all your incidents. The RA situation. Can you break that down for the listeners, please, sir?
Let's talk about it. Did I only try to make sure? Story I put. Okay, so it was a Saturday morning, and I was hanging out in my room, just on the internet, and just, you know, wasn't causing any trouble, wasn't doing anything.
Not smoking weed.
Not smoking weed, you know, even though I had dreads. So I was in my room, and Dennis, one of the cluster mates. So I lived in McMahon Hall, which was a cluster, which means that you have about 6 rooms that share the same common area and bathroom. Mm. So when you're outside of that cluster, you don't know where noise is coming from. You don't know, you just hear noise coming from a cluster, but you don't know what specific room. So Dennis, one of the white cluster mates, was listening to hip hop music, very loud. Mm. It was loud music, and apparently other people living in the housing started complaining about it, and the RA came. I forgot what I put her name as because I didn't use her real name, so we'll say Jessica. So Jessica came to our cluster with another RA, and usually when they come with another RA resident advisor, that means that they need a witness for whatever is about to transpire. So she opens up the cluster door, and then she knocks on my door. And, you know, I open my room up, and by this time, there had already been probably 2 or 3 incidents based on apparently we were too loud or too annoying or whatever had happened. You know? So we didn't have a good relationship with Jessica. So she knocks on the door. She opens up. I open up my room, and we're just both kind of standing there for a while. And I'm wondering, you know, what is she waiting for? She has these write-ups, you know, corrective action forms or whatever, in her hand, and she has an RA that's with her, you know, this taller gentleman, and we're just standing, you know, looking at each other for a minute. I'm trying to figure out what's going on. So I asked her, I was like, why are you here? You know, we were pretty blunt. We were pretty blunt at that time because we didn't have a good relationship. So I knew if she was coming to talk to me, it had to be something negative. And I realized that, you know, it was about the music. So she walked over to Dennis's room and she gave him a warning, you know, to turn down his music. And he said, "Oh, I apologize. I'm sorry." And then she walked out, and that was it. You know, but she had walked over. I mean, she brought the other RA. She had the write-up. She knocked on my door and assumed that because hip-hop was playing, that it was coming from my room. And she was, I mean, it looked like she was ready to write us up, but because Dennis, it might have been the fact that, you know, it was the first time she's had any issues with him. I'm not sure what the reasoning was, but nothing happened to Dennis. And I just thought that was ridiculous, and it was a double standard.
Wow.
It just wasn't. Yeah, so that was my experience.
I suspect that could be racism right there. could be incorrect, but and you said that you talked about it in the book that you and this particular RA, you felt like you all didn't really have a good relationship anyway, and it seemed like from what you said in the book, she didn't know what the problem was. It seemed like you said in the book she was like, what is the problem? What's going on?
She did not understand why we did not like her collectively. I mean, collectively we did not like her, but every time there was anything going on, it was assumed that it was us. I remember another time where two of the guys in our cluster were wrestling outside in the hallway, but yet, all of us, there were 5 guys total, but only 2 guys were wrestling, and we all got write-ups because 2 guys were wrestling, and it's hard to discern as a black student, is this happening to you because you're black, or is this happening because you were just there and you're not? It has nothing to do with race. But with her, it seemed that we were the only ones having issues, so it was hard to figure that out.
Wow. I think a lot of non-white students can relate to those types of relationships with RAs. Anybody, if you're not in school yet or if you didn't go, RA is a resident assistant, is that it?
I think resident advisor. So they are.
There you go.
Yeah, they just look over their designated floor and make sure that everything's running smoothly. None of the students are having issues with their roommates. That they feel safe and comfortable and all that good stuff.
Yeah, and generally these are just students. It's not like these are, police officers or anything like that.
They're like upperclassmen, sometimes even just sophomores. So.
Yeah, I think a lot of non-white students can share similar experiences of what you said, a double standard, where the white students don't seem to get the same disciplinary action that the non-white students get, or there seem to be a difference in the way they handle complaints. I think a lot of non-white students have experienced that at predominantly white institutions. Last but not least, my man Cody. Can we please tell them about Cody?
Cody, okay, so I met Cody through one of my roommates freshman year. Really good guy. I mean,
white person, correct?
White person, yes.
Okay.
I had no problems with him really. He enjoyed hip hop music and basketball, and would always come over to our room and show us his latest dance moves. He would ask us to critique his dance skills, and we would do it because we thought it was fun. It was entertaining, and you knew that it wasn't coming from like a bad place. That he was a good guy. But there was one night we managed to sneak into a party on Greek Row, and Cody was at the party, and he was drinking, and you just started seeing him become a little more confident. His swagger just was on another level, just very, very, what somebody would say is like stereotypically black, I guess. Just the way he approached people was just very confident, and something that you didn't see from him before. And as he was leaving the party, he walks up to me, he daps me up. He's like, "All right, my N-word, I'll see you later." And I think he really said it without any realization that he was white. I didn't think about it as him being racist. I really felt that at that time he thought he was black. For like that hour and a half that he was drunk, that the person that he's always, acting as if he was, finally just kind of came out. But at the same time, I was still just as angry. But because he was my friend, and he grew up with one of my roommates, it poses, really challenging on how, like, what to do at that point. But I didn't see him for, over a month after that. He walked through the crowd. I was with one of my friends, and I was just confirming with him. I was like, "Did you hear what he just said?" And after, we figured out that that's what he really said, we tried to find him, and I just didn't see him at the party. But and I didn't see him for, like I said, a month after. But just one of those things where, how do you manage that? he is somebody that you value as a friend, but he has overstepped his boundary. So, and my advice in those situations is just not to react, but it's easier said than done, because I've reacted like that, and I've reacted in, even once cause of physical altercation when I was a little bit younger. So it's easier to say that, but we still react to that word in such a way that's just not healthy.
Wow. And you said this was, someone, this wasn't just a random person, this was a friend, this was someone you had contact with before, and you all used to hang out.
Right.
Okay.
Right. I mean, he's a good guy. I've never known him to be malicious or try to insult me. I think at that moment in time, he really thought he was black. And I mean, you'll see it a lot at parties where hip hop music is playing and the N-word is in the song.
Mm-hmm.
And if white students are not aware that there's a black person in the crowd or in the group, they will say the N-word in the song, because they're so exposed to it, and it's just something that they see on a regular basis now.
I have to credit the admitted white supremacist known as Tim Wise. He's been on the Cows twice, and the first time he was on the program, he talked about how especially Greek fraternities, white fraternities and sororities, they have a history, legacy across the country of having these parties and being overtly racist, either dressing up in blackface, mimicking different non-white people in a very disrespectful manner, use of the word nigger. I think he even pointed out one instance they had some sort of minstrel party coincidentally on Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday, and everybody pleaded ignorance. What? We didn't know. It's just the day we wanted to have the party. And some of this has happened here at the University of Washington. I know I documented, they've had several incidents. I even reported one on the Cows before where Delta Epsilon, they were throwing items at non-white people and calling them racial slurs. The police were called. The victims of this incident left, so there were no victims to report what happened, so the police could not, further pursue the case. But it was written in the newspaper. It was also reported in the Seattle Times. Do you suspect that Cody could have been practicing racism in saying the word nigger to you and the way he was behaving at the party?
I don't. I think that he has always tried to emulate black culture. I mean, from everything he did, it was apparent that he had a fascination with black culture, and I don't think it came from a racist standpoint. I felt like he wanted to be part of this culture. So it's just sad that he had to go that route and use the word, but it's something that he was obviously embracing on a regular basis. From learning how to dance, I guess, that was one of his first ways of engaging with me and trying to build a relationship with me, was asking me to show him how to dance, or if I wanted to go play basketball with him. These are things that he thought were commonalities and ways to build our relationship, and he apparently was comfortable enough to use that word. So.
Very interesting. That kind of reminds me of what I had said before. I think I have observed a lot of these white people who, they love hip-hop music, they love Tupac, they own every Tupac album, they own every Bob Marley album. They've taken a lot of ethnic studies courses, but they still end up practicing racism, white supremacy. My suggestion for the non-white people, if a white person calls you a nigger, the thing that I have seen that brings everything to a screeching halt, ask them what they mean when they say nigger. I have seen that brings everything to a screeching halt. The white person then becomes uncomfortable because now they have to explain what they meant when they said that word. And I've just seen things go very interesting. That tends to make the white person uncomfortable. That's my suggestion. That's what I do. I don't think you need to fight or jump up and down or anything. Just ask them what they mean, have them give you an explanation, and see where it goes from there. I guarantee you, you will definitely throw the white person off their game if you do that. Well, again, we have lots of people that called into the Oh, got a hand. Okay. 951. If you have a comment for Mr. Mengesha, please, you are on the air.
Greetings. I wanted to speak again on the topic of non-white students. I guess asking questions and speaking about the system of racism, white supremacy. You mentioned the CHID department earlier, Gus, and I was a student of the CHID department, and I'd been in classrooms where the topic of the class was supposed to be on racism, white supremacy, and I would ask white people questions. And I could be incorrect, but white people are very good, in my observation, are very good at business. I don't know if you've seen the Godfather film. I think you have. Is that correct, Gus?
I'm sorry. Repeat that last part for me, please.
Have you seen The Godfather?
Oh, yeah. Yes, I have. Yes, sir.
Lull, have you seen The Godfather?
I have, but it's been a long time, so hopefully I can relate to what you're about to say.
Yeah. It's been my observation that white people are comfortable with saying the term white supremacy, but they're very good at business. And if you watch The Godfather, when they speak to each other at times, they can be very codified, very, very good at business, but they move in silence. And one quarter I took a class. I left the CHID department altogether, and I was taking a class in the honors department specifically. And there was a white professor there, and he approached me one day, and I went to his office. We spoke to each other, and I asked him about the system of racism, white supremacy. He agreed it existed, and one of the reasons I left the CHID department is because I was encountering a lot of difficulty with getting grades from professors. To this day, some professors have not returned emails. Some I've tried to meet in person have just have moved away from me, like physically trotted away from me. And this white professor said, you need to stop being so naive. There's a reason why some of these things are happening to you. And I said, interesting. And I asked him if he knew of any professors that worked in intelligence agencies. And he said that the CHID department had a lot of professors that worked in intelligence agencies, and they specifically went to the CHID department because they have a lot of travel programs, which I found interesting. But the comment I wanted to drop is if there's any non-white person that is, or the suggestion, excuse me, any white person that is white people, go ahead.
You dropped out for a little bit. You might want to start that over. We couldn't hear you. You dropped out a little bit.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'd suggest to any non-white person, if you would like to get through university without being mistreated, I doubt that's possible. But if you would like to make your tenure a bit easier, don't let white people detect that you are trying to understand what racism, white supremacy is, and you are trying to replace it with justice. I've observed that when white people notice that, you will be mistreated on many levels. And that's all I wanted to put out there. But it's been a very constructive program. Thank you for hosting, Gus, and thank you for sharing, Lou. I really appreciate that.
Anytime.
Thank you.
I also want to get back to the book because we've kind of focused a lot more on race in this second portion. But challenges are going to happen, whether they're race, cultural, or academic. And I think it's important that we just understand how to navigate college, and just whether you're a student of color. I've had white women in their 40s come up to me and tell me that they found value in my book because they could find commonalities to the challenges they faced when they were going to college as maybe the only woman in a classroom. So it's important to understand that there are challenges that you are going to face, and they're going to be racial, they are going to be cultural. But for me, the reason why I believe I was able to be successful as an undergraduate and why I'm successful working for a company here in the Northwest and in grad school, these different challenges, is because I've understand that if I don't focus on race and then I focus more on building commonalities and relationships with my peers from different backgrounds, then it makes things a lot easier. So that's my advice on, race, I guess.
Mm-hmm. You talked about how to successfully navigate a predominantly white institution as a non-white student. I think one important lesson that you talk about in your book dealing with racism, your encounters with enforcement officials, police officers. I guess if you want to talk about one particular incident and then maybe some suggestions for how to deal with that in the best way possible.
Okay. One situation that, it's been documented, so it's a lot easier for me to talk about, was when I was in high school. I was, like I said, I attended Rainier Beach High School in South Seattle, and a group of us students were selected to be part of a Black Data Processing Association, which is a group of students that it's a group that's focused on getting students to understand more about, computers and software and technology. So we met up on campus at the University of Washington. And one of the days that after we left the Black Data Processing Association and we were heading towards the bus stop, a group of cop cars, campus police, I think it was 3 or 2 police cars, surrounded us, asked us to stand still and, not to move. And I don't know what they were doing, but for about 15 minutes they held us as they were trying to make sure that we didn't fit not a stereotype, but apparently there was 2 black men that were in a restricted part of the UW hospital that fit our profile. Mm-hmm. Although there were 5 of us and we were teenagers, so that was a very discouraging moment, because it's things like that make students not want to come to campus. And we told our high school math teacher that had organized us into the Black Data Processing Association, and she was just infuriated. She wrote a letter to the president of UW, and our parents met with faculty and the president of UW, and he extended an apology and really wanted us to not lose sight of going to college and focus more on the positive things at UW. But you have to think of those are the experiences you're having at an early age as a student of color when you do visit the University of Washington or any other school for that matter. It can be discouraging, and it's easy to say, I don't want to be part of an environment where I'm viewed as a criminal versus a student. So that was a really challenging one. But I had the support of mentors and a lot of people that kept encouraging us to go to college, and things like that are going to happen. So when I do have incidents with police, I just try to be as polite as possible, because at the end of the day, at that point, they have all the power. When you're dealing with a police officer, they are in complete control at that time. And I don't know about you or anybody listening, but I've worked way too hard in my life to throw it away just because of some situation or an interaction with the cops. So I just try to be as polite as possible, and whatever they need, registration or whenever you're dealing with a cop, whatever they need, I just give it to them, and hopefully I move on.
I agree wholeheartedly. I wish we're actually going to have the former chief of police in Seattle. He's coming on the program later to talk about, he's a white person. He talks about the racism he observed in the police department here in Seattle. But I wholeheartedly agree. Enforcement officials, they're armed. They are trained in the use of deadly force. I don't have backup. I don't have a radio. I don't have a nightstick. I try to be as cordial as possible, polite as possible. I keep my hands visible. I don't do anything sudden. I answer their questions as respectfully as I can. One thing I do is ask questions. in a very calm and respectful manner. And I actually spoke with a enforcement official at the University of Washington, and I got this directly from him. I have tested this by fire. It has worked every time. When I am stopped by an enforcement official, I ask, why am I a person of interest? If they can't tell me anything, my immediate next question is, am I free to go? And I have seen where even I've had a white person that I suspect is a racist who is an enforcement official. He was calling me names. He was being very rude, mistreating me. Am I free to go? He continued to call me names. I didn't say anything. At that point, we have nothing to discuss unless you're going to tell me why you stopped me. He continued. He waited about a minute. You're free to go. End of story. That's what you want at the end of the day, is to be able to leave unharmed. I would encourage everyone, and I thought that was great because you talked in your book about how you used to, when you were younger, of course, that you loved an argument, and you talked about an incident on Creek Row, and you were asking them questions, and they I guess, asked you all to move along, and you said, why do we have to leave? Why are you always picking on us, type of a thing? And you said now you try not to do that as much.
Right. I mean, at the time you think you're fighting this huge battle, that you're making a difference when you're arguing with cops, but really, you're not. They're going to do what they're going to do, and it's important that you look out for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure that at the end of your interaction with a police officer, that you, just like you said, nothing is harmed. You are going back home or wherever you were planning on going without any challenges. And that, you just gave some really good advice. I had no idea that you could do that. So one more time, you just said to ask.
The number one question, why am I a person of interest? That's the first question. They have to tell you why they are stopping you. If you fit the description, if you've broken a law, they have to tell you. If they can't tell you what rule you've broken, or if you match a description, if they can't do either of those, the only other question is, am I free to go? If they can't tell you either one of those, you have nothing else to say. Am I free to go? And you're not rude. Am I free to go? And you just wait, and either they'll have to tell you why they're holding you, or they'll have to let you go, one or the other. And this has worked every time. I have been stopped by not one, 3 armed enforcement officials, and they were questioning me and da-da-da-da, and I just stopped, and did I do anything incorrect? No. Oh, okay. Am I free to go? Yeah, but immediately start walking. Nothing they can do at that point.
Wow. I never knew that. That's a great tool. I think that should be spread to a lot of people, is understanding their power with police.
Words are very important. I got that from talking to a white enforcement official. I just talked to him about what, same thing we're talking about. What should you do? What's constructive if you're stopped by an enforcement official? And he told me those are legitimate questions you can ask. You don't have to have an attitude. Just ask very calmly, and any enforcement official should be able to answer those questions. And it has worked. I use that all the time, repeatedly. I would tell anybody, use that. I've even had enforcement officials ask, what is your name? And I just ask, am I required to give you my name? And they've said no. Oh, well, I don't feel like giving you my name. Okay. Just being calm, respectful, just asking questions. Same thing I do on the cows, just asking white people questions works wonders. But you got to do it respectfully. Got to be respectful. You can't be yelling at them, acting crazy. Sir, ma'am, the same way that I talk on the show is the same way I talk to enforcement officials, and it tends to work. And I keep my hands up. Hands visible, nothing sudden. Again, you're killing my phone line, sir. You have questions. 803, if you have a question for Mr. Mengesha, you are live on the air.
And how are you doing this evening?
I'm well, sir. How are you?
Good. You have a very valid point. I think tone is something that's very important. But also I think different parts of the country do things a little differently. Mm-hmm. And if you go to, I'm originally from New York City. If you're in New York and you have an incident with the police, you can be kind and you can be respectful. And they have a gang mentality because they're the oldest gang in the nation. And you can say, if you were to ask that question to your New York police officer, he'll think you're being a wise ass, and you might get a billy club up your head. I mean, New York City is notorious. Think of any other city in the country where you can have someone be stopped right before they get married and get 50 shots, or you can get 40 shots. It happens all the time in New York. It's not it's not like one incident. There are so many incidents where the police, and they're not like the LA police, you hear about them beating someone. They sodomize someone in New York City. They sodomized an immigrant, a dude who never committed a crime in his life, who barely spoke English well. He spoke, broken English and some French, and they sodomized this dude. So so I think, at the end of the day, I mean, it's great that, that's a good tip, but, you're talking about an armed military force in New York. There's 45,000 cops in New York. You go to Manhattan. I was in Manhattan, and I have I have South Carolina plates on my car. So I went to go see my father, and I got stopped by the cops. And of course, I've never personally had a problem with police because, like you said, I actually was in the Coast Guard, so I did some law enforcement training for a period of time. And like you said, that's basically it. You have to what's the reason for the cause? Did you break a law that you weren't cognizant of? And then also, is there anything else I can do to help you, sir? And so I've never really had that problem, but there's a major problem of decency, human decency, in certain areas of the country, and how certain groups are viewed. And the fact that, say for instance, like the mayor, when an incident happens, the first thing that they'll say is, well, we don't want to rush to judgment. How much evidence do you need that there was a wrong done and that people are being treated unfairly when you have on your watch 3 different incidents where cops, they have a term for it called contagious gunfire, where one cop shoots and all of them shoot at the same time, because the first person who lets off the shot, they let off 50 rounds in this kid. Amadou Diallo, they let off 40 rounds in this kid. And it happens all the time. So when is enough enough?
Thank you. 803, did you want to respond to that, Mr. Mengesha?
No, I think he did a great job dropping knowledge on us there.
Yeah, again, my conclusion, we're in a system of white supremacy. Police abuse of non-white people is a part of the system of white supremacy. That sort of thing is going to continue worldwide. This type of thing happens in South Africa. This doesn't just happen in New York. I believe Oscar Grant was in California. And I mean, California, they are infamous for those types of incidents. Cincinnati, I mean, worldwide, I've never been anywhere where black people say the police treat them well. That's just a part of the system of white supremacy. You're going to have those types of things happen. The best thing I can do is make suggestions to try to decrease the likelihood of those things happening. But as long as we're in a system of white supremacy, you can expect more Amadou Diallos, more Oscar Grants, and tons of these types of things that happen across the country. I wanted to touch on, because I thought this was very interesting, dating, big topic, college campuses. Excuse me. You talked about being a non-white student and going out with Asian females, white females, and you talked about some of the difficulties there. Can you talk about specifically with Asian females first and then with white females?
Okay. I felt that a lot of the times when I was approaching Asian girls on campus, that they had a lot of misconceptions about who I was, and if I was a player or whatever, they used a lot of stereotypes. And when I would talk to my Asian female friends about, just preference-wise, like what would your parents think about you dating a black male? They even broke down a hierarchy as far as like preference, what their parents would like, and it seemed that it would be other Asian men, then white men, and at the very end, or bottom, would be black males. So just as far as a preference for what their parents would like, and I think that goes on to what they many times were interested in. So
wow.
That's what I saw there.
And you said maybe because of that, maybe that was a strong or significant factor in why it was more difficult to pursue Asian females?
Right. I would say on campus of the different ethnicities, I would say Asian girls were, very more challenging to connect with and build relationships with.
How about the white females?
See, that for me it was still difficult, but I found that it varied. So like if a lot of the black male athletes seemed many times to really only talk to white girls on campus. And through conversation, what we've kind of come up with the conclusion is that when you're a black male athlete, many times you're viewed as a athlete first. So the descriptive terms. So say you're a girl and you're describing to your friend who you are dating or talking to. First statement would be, I'm dating an athlete on campus, or I'm dating this guy on the football team, or their race might be assumed black, but it's still, if it may be viewed as a negative, it won't even compare to the fact this person is an athlete, which on a campus, a college campus, is, a lot of times it's your highest, you're the big man on campus. But what I found is when I approached Latino girls, we shared so many commonalities as far as like communities we grew up in and family structure. So it wasn't hard to form relationships with them.
I'm curious about the white girl thing because I'm in the hub right now. I feel like I see a lot of black males who seem like they have pretty easy access to white females, and they don't really look like they're athletes. They just look like regular students. Now, I could be incorrect. Maybe they're on the football team and I don't know it, or some other athletic team here. It seems like there's a great deal of black male, white female hooking up on the campus of UW.
Yeah, it could happen. And I also could have just been on an isolated part. I spent a lot of my time at the Ethnic Cultural Center or at the Instructional Center. So I wasn't as engaged as like Greek Row or where you might find more white females. So that's just what I would see, And also with my friends, that's what we would see. So that's the conversation that I've had. But I really don't see it as much with non-black or non-athlete black males as much as I do with athlete black males.
That is very interesting. I know Yellow Manny, anybody who's been listening to the Cows, he is an Asian male, and he is also a student at the University of Washington. And his comment was that he feels that Asian males have a very difficult time forming relationships with white females, but for black males, he feels that's pretty easy. He feels like he observes that pretty frequently, and seems like the black students that he knows, black males anyway, they don't really have a problem getting a white female in a relationship or what have you. But for Asian males, that's a bit tougher.
I've never really looked at it through the experience or the lens of an Asian male. But I feel like the relationship of black male and white female is just, I think it's over traumatized. I don't know if it's really that prevalent. Do you have any callers that would like to call in and talk about that?
We have a ton of callers, sure. Let's see. Let's go. 951. Did you have a comment, question?
Just listening for now. Thank you, sir.
No problem. Come back, see if he has one. 253, do you have a question, comment?
I have a comment.
Okay.
A few of them, actually.
Go right ahead.
I am a so-called Asian female. And from my experience of college campuses and whatnot, it has been, in my observation, that black males have had easy access to the white women, and I think that that's because the white women are kind of the getting place. They're kind of, I mean, we are in the system of white supremacy. They do have the resources. You know, in college they had the money, they had the cars, they had the clothes, everything else. And then, you know, as victims, as a non-white person, then, you know, just being friends with other non-white females, you know, I mean, it was always a discussion that we had talked about. You know, I mean, these white females could just, you know, not be attractive in any sense. And, you know, but it seemed like, you know, that's where other victims, particularly black males, would go. And then I would say that as far as, you know, Asian males and black males.
Oh, wait. Can we talk more about that point? Would you say
Sure.
that they were receptive to dating black males, or
that white women were?
That white women were, yeah.
I think a lot of them were, and I think, you know, I mean, I know that when I was going to school, the term, and not that I think it was correct or anything, but the term that was tossed around was that they were called mud sharks. You know, and that was, I guess, meaning that, you know, these white females were going after, chasing these black males.
What was the term again? Mud shark?
Mud shark, yeah.
Wow.
You know, that I guess that was just the term that that I commonly heard. I never used the term, but I just commonly heard that amongst females that were white that were, you know, dating black males, and that would only date black males. They would, you know, if one didn't work out or whatever, you know, you'd never see these females with a white male or any other non-white male. It would always be with a black male.
Just dropping some knowledge on me. This is stuff.
I have learned something on this. Well, I learned lots, but that is brand new to me. Mud sharks. Wow. Please, if you had more that you wanted to share, 253.
And I just had a comment also on the yellow males versus black males and the different experiences and whatnot. It does seem that the access for black males would, you know, are, you know, far and beyond way easier than with yellow males. My brothers, for example, you know, I mean, they like, you know, one of my brothers in particular, you know, I mean, he's an attractive male, you know, he's a pharmacist, you know, and whatnot, and you know, it's you know, it seems like that yellow males have to be, I guess, like, have to have, like, you know, economic status, a high education, and, you know, they have to have some type of status associated to them to be able to attain a relationship with a white female. And as Gus had said, you know, just a regular old student, a black male student, you know, one that's not associated with athletics, that, you know, one would perceive that that's why that, you know, they're getting the white girls or whatever, you know. It's different for a yellow male, and I apologize. It's hard for me to articulate, but, you know, just if I could summarize it, it's just pretty much that yellow males, I believe it is harder for them to attain a relationship with a white female. Not that I would encourage it or anything, but it is more difficult for them unless they have some type of stature or some type of position.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
Wow.
Hmm.
Do you think also, too, that many of these white women are coming from that same economic standpoint that they're expecting from Asian males? So, for example, lots of white women on campus were coming from middle-class backgrounds. So maybe one of the challenges I face is that I didn't come from necessarily a middle-class neighborhood, and maybe that could also be the same with Asian males. I'm just throwing this out there, trying to see what you think.
Are you asking that would the white female search for the same economic status as economic background as they came from?
Right. So what I'm saying is, like, so I try to, figure out what it could be and not assume that it's race, that it's based on race first. And there's a possibility that, I didn't come from the same economic class as them, so we didn't share those commonalities. And could it also be the same with maybe Asian males, as you just said, that they might not come from the same economic background?
I guess I would say that I wouldn't say that they were searching for a person that was from their same economic background. I believe that it would have to be, who they were, because I think that, like, if from a white female standpoint, like, to be associated with an Asian male or yellow male, the yellow male would have to be of, like, coming from a higher economic status or be in that higher position at the time for them to even, talk to them. So, for example,
so higher than where she is at?
Right. And that would be how the yellow male would get some type of attention or would even be pursued.
Okay, I get where you're going then. Okay. Interesting.
But from my experience, I have seen black males from low to high economic status, and especially low, and the white females will be just standing in line waiting for them.
Wow.
I was just going to add on. I think there's also, there is an economic level, but there's also, social capital that is gained. Maybe, that level of coolness, I guess, in college is of value. It's something to look at. So when you're in college, maybe you saw it a lot more than I did, apparently, but when you did see it, it could come from the fact that it would be considered cool to date a black male, and that's something that you might not see by dating an Asian male. There might not be that same level of cool. It's like it could be like kind of like a taboo to date a black male. I mean, I don't know. I just didn't really see it that much, so I'm just going off of what you're telling me.
This is Kim, everybody. If you are enjoying the conversation, she's been on the couch before. She was on the program, The Female Victims of White Supremacy, Sharing Constructive Information. Glad she could call in. Kim, hang tight. I'm going to leave you on the line. Somebody just called in from 111 and put a hand up. I believe, I thought I had you. If my switchboard cooperates, hopefully it will, I will get you on the line. I see you. Okay, got you. Caller that called in, you're at 111. You just put a hand up. Do you have a question or comment?
Greetings, Renegade.
Greetings, 702. How are you doing, sir?
I'm okay.
I
have a... How are you?
Was that to the guest?
Good. I'm doing good. How are you? Good.
I'm okay. I have a question for the Asian female.
She's on the line, Kim.
Yes.
I'm sorry?
There were... Hello?
Hello?
Should I continue with my question?
I'm sorry, can you start over?
Yes. My question is for you, Kim.
Yes.
Yes. I think earlier, and I missed much of the program, but earlier I think I heard someone say that when he tried dating Asian females, the family had a classification or an order in which they wanted the females to pick their male dates. And I believe he said that the family preferred that the females would marry or date Asian males first, and then white males, and then black males.
Right.
And
that was
so
what I saw. Oh, okay. I was just going to say that's the hierarchy that I would see, that not necessarily that blacks would be next after white, but that they would be last.
Oh, okay. Okay. So my question to Kim is that what she finds too, and or does she know Asian females who also have that kind of hierarchy?
I would say that in my own experience with my parents, there's definitely opposing views. My dad, I would say that unfortunately he's a victim in the System of White Supremacy. He does function and have a view of, I guess, this hierarchy that has been described on the show today. And my mother, on the other hand, is more open. She's, she doesn't care what, if it's black, yellow, white. She doesn't have a preference. Generally speaking, with other Asians, and just I have a very large extended family, I would probably say that it's actually the hierarchy would be white on top, and then so forth, and then I would unfortunately have to say that black would be at the bottom.
And how about yourself, if you don't mind?
Well, I guess my own, I'm in a relationship with a black male currently, and I have dated mostly non-white males. So in my book, I guess it would go, black at the top and white at the bottom.
Let me check. We have a lot of people who called in. I just want to check to see if anybody has specific questions for our guests. You all can hang tight. I will see if anybody has questions for Mr. Mengesha. 816, did you have a question for our guest, Mr. Mengesha? 816, you're live. Did you have a question?
No, not yet.
Okay.
I'm still listening.
No problem, sir. Thank you for listening to the program. We have a bunch of people who called with 111s. I'm just going to go down the line since I can't see their area code. 111, did you have a question or comment? 111? Oh, this is my fault. My switchboard is not acting correctly. Okay, there we go. 111, the first one. If you called in, did you have a question or comment? You're on the line live. Question or comment called in from 111. Okay. We'll check the other one. Question or comment? You just called in 111 or didn't call in too long ago. 111. Did you have a question or comment? Okay. Guess they're listening. We'll check 951. Did you have a question or comment? 951.
Greetings, sir. I was listening to the discussion of the white female, specifically in the black male, and I was thinking of white genetic annihilation, which in short is that
I think he's cutting out, right? Am I?
Uh-oh. We cannot hear you, sir. Are you still talking? Are you there with us, 951? Uh-oh. He might be having phone issues. I want to make sure I don't forget. Mr. Mengesha, could you please tell us your website so that people can go check out, because you write on your site as well as people can purchase your book there.
Correct. At lullmengesha.com. So Lull, last name Mengesha. And you can also just Google The Only Black Student or Google Lull Mengesha, and it should show up as one of the top results. So.
Outstanding. They can purchase your book there, is that correct?
Yes, you can purchase it on Amazon. You can purchase it at lullmengesha.com, and I just signed with a larger distributor, so you'll start seeing my book at more bookstores across the country.
Outstanding. There is a picture for his book, The Only Black Student. There's a picture for the book. If you're listening at Blog Talk Radio, click that picture. It will take you to Amazon.com, and you can snap it up right there. I highly recommend the book. Lots of constructive information, suggestions for non-white students, particularly if you're going to be going to a predominantly white institution. 253, you're on the air if you had a question, final question or comment for our guest, and also 702, you're there if you have a 720, excuse me, if you have a final question or comment for our listener before we wrap things up.
I don't have any comments or questions.
Okay. 720.
Outstanding show, and I'm not sure how to pronounce your guest name. Is it Mengesha?
Yes, Lull Mengesha.
Thank you. You've been very constructive. And thank you also, Kim. And, of course, Renegade, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for tuning in to the program. Again, The Only Black Student, University of Washington alumnus, Lull Mengesha. Outstanding information. Please pick up the book. Thank you for sharing your time with us on the program. Thoroughly appreciate it. And thank you for the signed book. I will have to hold on to my copy.
Anytime, man. I really had a great time and learned a lot from your guests as well. So you can all contact me at lullmengesha@gmail.com to follow up and follow my blog and future projects. So thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you for sharing time with us. I greatly appreciate it. Before I let you go, you end your book with a poem. Mr. Rudyard Kipling, his poem is If.
Yes.
You talked about how that was a motivational bit of literature for you and kind of kept you focused. And I do think it's a pretty good poem. I did want to ask, are you informed about Rudyard Kipling?
Informed as far as his views on race and his work with the Jungle Book and all that stuff. Or
White Man's Burden.
I am, and it's a challenge. The poem has a lot of great information. The poem does have a lot of. For me, it's been very motivating, and it is hard to know that the author of it, his views. So. Yeah, we'll have to. Is that going to be another discussion, or another chat about that?
For sure. If you could make time, for sure. I definitely. I just found that very interesting. That's where the book ends. Because when I see his name, the first thing I think of is White Man's Burden. If you're listening and you don't know who Mr. Kipling is, he is the author of White Man's Burden, which basically talks about the labor of being a white person and having to be in charge of the planet with so many heathen non-white people. I think that's a pretty accurate summary of what that poem is about. He is well known for that, and many white people would consider him a white supremacist. So I just thought that was interesting. That's where the book ends at. But you know about all that. So
I know about it. It's hard because, I mean, the poem, to me, is it's just really powerful. But then
for sure, I agree.
Behind it, and it is discouraging to know that he thought of me as a heathen.
Me too. Me too. Yeah. Hey, I would love it if you would like to come back and chat. I definitely would love to have some other discussions about the University of Washington and to get your perspective. You certainly are well informed, and I thoroughly enjoyed the program and your book, sir.
Thank you. Great time once again. lullmengesha.com. You can find The Only Black Student on Amazon. So, thank you.
Thank you, sir, and I hope I wish you continued success. I hope the book sells tons of copies, and I will definitely be in touch, sir.
Okay. All right.
Thank you very much, sir.
Okay.
Outstanding. I thoroughly enjoyed the program. I hope everybody out there listening, hope they enjoyed it. Hope they found information constructive. Kim and 720 are still there if you had anything you wanted to say before we close the broadcast out.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening.
I just wanted to say that when I was speaking of my experience in college and then just the term and everything, I just wanted to clarify that, you know, I just think that the term is very derogatory that was used for white females to chase after, you know, or to be interested or date, you know, black males and whatnot. But, you know, it was just kind of turned around. I think it's not necessarily derogatory towards the white female, but derogatory towards the black male.
And that term was mud sharks, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. That is fascinating. I had never heard that term before. If someone had said it, I wouldn't have known what they were talking about, but that is fascinating. And they used to say, did white people and non-white people use that term?
Yes.
Wow. Wow. Incredible. Well, I have learned something. Actually, since I have Kim here, I was thinking of trying to get the non-white females who participated in the previous program to do a program talking about experiences, views on sexual intercourse between non-white people and white people. I've noticed some interesting differences between how non-white females think and feel about this and how non-white males think and feel about this. Would you be interested in hanging out for that show and sharing your views on the mud shark phenomenon?
Sure, I'd be happy to.
Outstanding. We will see if we can get that done when she has free time, when I can round everybody else up. But I think that would be a very constructive program. Oh, my gosh, what a lead-in for Saturday. The Saturday program, Richard Bernstein. He is a white male. He has written for the New York Times. He has written for Time Magazine. He currently writes for the International Herald Tribune. He wrote a book titled The East, the West, and Sex. It is all about the history of white men in sexual relationships with Asian females. Saturday, 4 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Central, 1 p.m. Pacific. He will be here. The second chapter of his book is titled The Whole World as the White Man's Brothel. That is the title of chapter 2 of his book. Man, I am looking forward to the program. And he's married to an Asian female. I'm looking forward to the program. Please tune in for that one. We have 2 other shows on Sunday in addition to the Saturday program. Mark Riding will be here Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. If you saw the Newsweek that had the white infant on the front, it's talking about racism. Mark Riding had an article in that Newsweek. He is a black male. He has adopted a white female. He'll be on the program Sunday to talk about that experience, being a black male with an adopted white child, and just what his experience has been with that. And the second program on Sunday afternoon, it's 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific. Reverend Dr. Bay, she focuses on words, the importance of words, how to use a dictionary correctly, the importance of knowing the definitions that people are using when they speak to you, how people can mistreat you if you do not know what they mean when they use particular words. That's all she focuses on, and I think that's very important if you're going to discuss racism, white supremacy, to be very careful about words. So those are the next 3 coming up. Hope everybody enjoyed the program today. Thank you for tuning in. I believe Justice will be back for the weekend. I hope so, because we have a white person for Saturday. So hopefully it will be Justice and Gus T. Renegade. If you would like to shoot her an email to encourage her email, I hope she doesn't get angry, but she said it before. Her email is justice.asap@yahoo.com. You can send her an email, tell her you missed her on the program. Miss you, Justice. Hopefully she'll be back. Check the blog, racism-notes.blogspot.com, and please support Back of the Bus's blog as well, nonwhitealliance.wordpress.com. Thank you, everyone who called in. Tons of people called the program tonight. Thank you for calling in. Thank you, everyone who listened in the chat room. We will be back, hopefully, to share constructive information to replace white supremacy with justice immediately.